I don't want no oil a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you have tuned into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you and your health, your wealth, and your family's health and wealth and happiness, those of your neighbors, and those of the whole world, really, because ecology is that one science that encompasses everything, the whole planet. And once a week for an hour or so, we'd like to talk about it here on our show. And we're going to be talking about it today with a guest, special guest. Dr. Heidi Hutner will be joining us again. And she recently had some pretty dramatic experiences there with Hurricane Isaias. And at the bottom of the hour, we're going to be hearing from our sponsors. And then, of course, our co-host, our wonderful co-host, Rebecca Wood, will be joining us. And then we'll have some environmental news and views and our letter from the future. And basically, we've just got a jam-packed show for you today. And the news and views is this week, it's not all bad news. I'm going to say that right up front. Last week, we had kind of a depressing eco-news episode because everything was bad news. But this week, there's some bright spots there. And you know, speaking of bright spots, normally we do this show from the studio, and it's the wonderful experience. We've got all the accoutrements and all the resources of the intense studio, and sometimes as I'm coming in, actually, because I come in early on Sunday mornings, I run into the cleaning crews coming out, all those people that they have working, polishing the marble, polishing the brass, keeping the ferns watered. The people that support the whole station and just keep everything looking sparkling and pristine. And it kind of got me to thinking about how nature supports us all the time. It's always there in the background, and we know from school and natural science class, we know that, the plants are always there creating oxygen for us, and the insects and the animals are there cycling the nutrients around. We know these big general sort of patterns, but there's something going on right now, very timely, that shows just how direct that support from nature can be. And that's what I wanted to talk about this morning in the few minutes we have before Dr. Hutner comes on, and that is things that the natural world can just supply to you directly. I mean, without processing, without going to the store, you just literally walk out your back door and boom, there it is. And one of those things is ink. And there's a big, beautiful plant called pokeweed, also called inkweed. And right now, the inkweed berries are getting ripe. And these are berries that hang in a bunch, kind of like grapes, but they're smaller than grapes and they're purple. They're poisonous. Don't eat them. I'm going to say that right up front. They've got alkali poison toxins in them that you don't want to eat them. They're not super toxic. I mean, I've known people that ate them accidentally and they did fine. They didn't die. But I just don't eat them, okay? But what you can do is you can pick them and you can squeeze the juice out of them, and you can use that juice directly as ink. No going to the store, no processing, no big factories. Just literally, there's these bushes sitting outside your door right now that want to give you some ink. And I actually went to the store this year, went to the art supply store, and I bought myself a fountain pen. And I am going to be squeezing ink out of the inkberry bushes that we just let grow in our yard. We didn't have to plant them. They took care of that themselves. And a special offer to anyone who becomes a patron for Green Future, and we're very happy and grateful to our patrons. If you go to patreon.com and just search for Green Future, there's different levels of membership, and every month you can get just a little bit taken out of your checking account. You won't even notice it. We will notice it, though, because we really appreciate that support. But for everybody who does it in the month of August or September, because that's when the pokeberries are available and ripe, I'll do a handwritten note with inkberry ink and send that to you saying thank you for supporting us. And so, ink, that's a cool thing. You don't think of nature just making ink for you, but there's also soap. Yeah, there's a plant called soapwort, which I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's just you take the plant, and if you want to wash your hands or wash some dishes, it's full of soap. It produces saponin. It produces soap as a defense against insects. And literally, you can just take this plant, this soapwort, and just start washing your hands with it. It suds up just like hand soap, and it does a great job. It's a little bit green. It can I wouldn't try to wash clothes with it unless you want your clothes to have a greenish tinge. It won't tinge your hands though. That rinses right off. But yeah, so another cool thing that nature can provide. Literally, just pick it and use it. And then, of course, there's countless medicinals that nature provides, and I could literally do. In fact, people do entire semesters, entire college courses just on medicinal wild plants that grow wild. But I'm just going to cover two really simple ones that are very easy to pick and identify. One is called King's Heel or Heal All, and if you're a reader of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, if you saw that, or even if you saw the movie, and there's this herb that Aragorn goes out to save Frodo because he's been pierced by a mogul blade, and he just finds this little herb that sort of heals everything. It's just got these really great healing properties. That's what Heal All or Self-Heal do. It's a mint. And so it's a short little plant. It's got square stems with a big flower on top. Well, relatively big. It's a little cylindrical flower. It's not a big showy flower. It's sort of a cylindrical thing with purple petals on it. And literally, you just pick this, and you could use it like Neosporin, or I should say people have used it like Neosporin. You just squeeze a little juice from the stem on your cuts. And my experience is, and the experience of colonists and herbalists, is that the cut will heal quicker. You'll just get better faster. It's much less likely to get an infection, and it's been used by people for hundreds and thousands of years. It's called Heal All or Self-Heal. And then there's one more I wanted to talk about, which is may come in very handy for some people, and it's one that I've recommended to people, and one people have used and with great success, and that is a plant called Touch Me Not. And Touch Me Not is a little plant that it's kind of a waxy green color, a very light green, and it grows in moist areas. It likes to be down near rivers and things. And Touch Me Not is a treatment for poison ivy. So if you've got a bad case of poison ivy, if you manage to find some touch-me-not, you just pick the plant and you can squeeze the juice of the touch-me-not onto the poison ivy. And my experience is that it clears it up within 3 days. And I've helped people that have had terrible poison ivy and have tried everything, all the steroids and the creams and so forth that the doctors recommend. And I've actually taken them into the woods, found some touch-me-not. It likes shade, so it's found under trees and so forth. And you have to pick it and use it right there. It's not a kind of plant where you can pick it and take it home and, hours or days later it works, because they dry out, they wilt very quickly. So you pretty much have to pick it and squeeze it right onto the poison ivy right away. And the poison ivy dries up, and, like I say, I've helped people with it. This isn't medicinal advice. This is just, I'm just informing you about a folk remedy which has been used for a long time. And the point I want to make about all these natural cures and all these natural services that nature is really just wants to provide us. I mean, nature just grows these plants and has these resources. All we have to do is not destroy it, and it will provide those for us. And that's an important lesson, I think, and it was one that I kind of came to through scouting, through researching things like edible wild plants, and it slowly dawned on me that, wow, nature isn't this thing we have to battle and dominate and control. Nature really just wants to get along, and it's constantly offering us things, constantly offering us gifts, and all we have to do is not throw those gifts back in nature's face. All we have to do is not be total jerks about it and just be a little bit grateful. And, so just like I will be grateful to anybody who becomes a patron in the next August or September, as I'm writing out my thank you letter using inkweed ink. So that would be something to look forward to. All right. So our guest should be calling in. Actually, she should have already called in by now. Russell, do we have Heidi on the line yet? Okay. So I will just send her a little text to remind her. And in the meantime, we'll talk a little bit about why I asked Heidi on specifically. And that is that Ms. Hutner, or Dr. Hutner, hold on. My phone's doing something a little unpleasant. Yeah, Dr. Hutner lives on the East Coast, and she was hit by Hurricane Isaias. And Hurricane Isaias was a terrible storm, and it didn't, in this time of COVID and this time of so many other dramatic news stories, we didn't get as much coverage of it as we have some other hurricanes. But Hurricane Isaias caused over $4.2 billion in damage. And most of that was in the U.S., about $4 billion of that. But it was a very intense storm in that it was like, first it was a tropical depression, then it was a storm, then it was a hurricane, then it went back to being a tropical depression, then it became a hurricane again. And it worked its way up the east coast of the United States. And it caused over, let's see how many millions of people, 3 million people were without power, about half of them in New Jersey. And some people are actually still without power. And it's just a reminder that we, with all our technology, we're still dependent on having a stable environment. I mean, if hurricanes become the norm, if hurricanes are just coming along every week or every couple of weeks or so, then our systems, our infrastructure, those things we've constructed to support ourselves, won't stand up. They won't continue to support us. No matter how strong we think we are, no matter how much we think we've dominated nature, you never actually win against nature, because nature literally has the last word all the time. And And I'd like to have the first word now with our guest, Dr. Hutner. Heidi, are you with us?
I am. How nice to hear your voice again.
Yes, likewise. Thanks for coming on the show. This is our the second time I think you've been on. It's very nice to have you. And I asked you to come.
No, I said yes. It is my second time. Thank you for having me on.
Sure. Okay, I asked you to come on because you recently went through some unpleasant experiences down there on the coast. Could you just remind us whereabouts you live and tell us a little bit about what happened?
Sure. I live in Long Island, New York, just outside of New York City, about an hour or so on the North Shore, and so we face Connecticut. And we were hit with the Hurricane Isaias. I don't think I'm pronouncing it correctly. It was hardly on the news. I mean, I don't think I heard it. It was interesting because it was more of one of those things where we're being hit with a storm and where's the information publicly? Hardly any information at all. I didn't even realize it.
I did notice that about this storm. Most hurricanes that actually manage to hit the coast, it's constant coverage and it's headlines for weeks, and it seemed like this one was really being downplayed.
Yes. In fact, it was I didn't realize it was even happening. I was out shopping, and then it was very stormy, and I knew that there was the high wind coming, but that's about it. And of course, we're all distracted with COVID, so that was my main concern, getting some groceries and doing it carefully and getting them back home. And on my trip back home, what should take me 10 minutes took me an hour because every road I went down, trees were down and wires were down, and I was getting pretty scared because the trees are coming down and I'm in a car. We could be hit by a tree or a heavy branch or whatever. And, and then I was home and went through it. And it really was a challenging reminder of Sandy. Of course, with Sandy, we did have warning, but, it felt very similar in the sense that, there's just very little preparation, which is one of the things I know you heard me talking about, which is probably why you asked me to come on. I mean, the biggest shock to me was, one, that we were not really warned as a community. You really should stay inside, and there's this dangerous thing happening, and I don't feel there was much preparation. And then once the storm was sort of, it came through and it left, and it fairly quickly, and then it left a lot of damage, a lot. And once again, like with Sandy, it seemed to be there was no preparation. Trees came down, our wires are all above ground, our electrical wires and our phone lines and cable wires are all above ground. And so, it's a very treed area, and it seems like there was no cutting back, no awareness of, the same thing as before, where these, debris is going to fall down on wiring, and we'll lose electricity, and not only lose electricity, and this was to me even far scarier than that, was that there were a lot of live wires all over the place, and for days, live wires, and no sign of trucks or help or information. Once again, and this feeling like we're not as a society, at least where I live, paying attention to what the earth is telling us, that we are in a, wildly, climactically active period, and we're not prepping for it. We're acting like, oh, this isn't happening. And, oh well, yeah. Another flood. Oh well, another fire. Oh well, another major storm.
Yeah, I think you mentioned on Facebook that there was one of these live wires literally burning just outside your house for a long time?
Yes, several hundred feet below my street, for several days. And their solution was, there was a young guy sitting in a car. I didn't know he even worked for the electrical company. And the reason I knew about it was because I saw him on the side of the road, and I was chatting with him, and I realized, oh, he's with the PSAG, and people were chatting with him, and I went over to speak to him and let him know there was another wire closer to my house And he said, "Oh, I'm here watching this fire, this wire burning, and in case something happens, I'm here." And he had no ability to do anything. He didn't have any equipment with him. He was just watching, and he was there for at least 2 days. And he said his ability to communicate through Verizon, he couldn't. That Verizon, because my Verizon wasn't working either. You would get spinning. It was really hard to call out. You could a little bit sometimes, but not consistently. It's hard to text out. So I did not feel very reassured that the person watching the fire had no means to communicate with anyone. If in fact the fire, grew. But you could smell smoke. You could literally smell the smoke.
So PSEG, that's what's the name of that company?
Oh gosh, that's our electrical company, PSEG. So
something electric and gas. That's right. So it sounds like maybe they just sent him there to do the YouTube video, okay, and maybe they could get some income off of that, because it doesn't sound like they sent him there to fight any fires or anything. Wow,
he couldn't fight the fire. I think he was supposed to let them know somehow. They're called the Public Service Enterprise Group, is their full name.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you were without power for a long time, and what kind of challenges did that present?
Well, I was actually only out. I mean, I was luckily only out for 3 days. I have friends who are still out today as we speak. Well, the challenges are, food issues. I had just, the food. I don't have a generator. Some of my neighbors do. So your food goes bad. You can't communicate out. That was a bigger concern of mine was, if with that fire burning close by, if there had been if the fire had spread, how would I communicate out? It was, it was very spotty service. The Verizon seemed to go down as well. So I was very anxious about what happens if there's a fire, what happens if there's a burglary, what happens if there's an accident, and my inability to communicate out to anyone for help. I would say those are the two biggest things. Because of the temperature, okay, so there's cold water for showering, you'll survive. But, of course, if it gets colder, which is what happened with Sandy, we had no heat and no warm water, and it did get starting to get quite cold. So that was a problem. But in this case, it's summer. The other problem is that where I live, everybody has a generator, so it becomes impossible to sleep. And it's so loud. And some of the generators are really loud. So then you think, well, if you have 8 days of no sleep, 8 days of no warm food, all you can talk about all the, but now it's more than 8 days. I do know people who still don't have electricity or so I mean, that's the problem is I'm not sure in their case if Verizon, I haven't asked them if the Verizon they can use it. I know I couldn't use it. I had to drive away from here. And the first night there was no gas, and gas stations were all closed, everything in the area, and I was very low on gas. So that was a big concern because I was nervous because in Sandy there was fighting at gas stations and the people had weapons. So I was really afraid, the PTSD kicks in. I'm exaggerating, but I was afraid, like, okay, where are we going here again? And, when you don't have Wi-Fi and you don't have phone service, you don't really know what's going on. I had no way to find out, how bad it is, how widespread it is. There's really no one to call for help. I mean, that's one of the things that's really troubling that I found in Sandy was that there's like nobody, it's like I wrote about this in a piece, in an article, and we all think someone's coming to help. No one's coming, So what I really worry about is, I'm healthy and able-bodied and can get out and can say, I'm okay. But I really worry about older people in their homes or disabled people in their homes, sick people in their homes. If they can't communicate out, if they can't get their medications, if, all of these things, no one's checking on them. No one's going in, and it's a problem with climate change in general. There's a film called Cooked, which I highly recommend people watch, by Judith Helfand. And it's about, I forget the year this happened, but there was a heat wave in Chicago, and numbers of people died. Older Black people died in their apartments because it was so hot, and nobody came, nobody shows up, and this is my concern, is this sort of like, there's the side of, we need to stop producing, the emissions we're producing to reduce climate change. But what are we doing to prepare for the reality?
One thing I wanted to ask you, you're a professor at Stony Brook, and what's your exact title there?
Well, I was the director of sustainability studies for 5.5 years. I am no longer. I'm my degree is I'm an English professor, and I expanded my area of my work and my research into environmental studies. So basically, so I do something called environmental humanities. So through the humanities, I look at environmental issues. I do not have a science background. That's not my training, but I look at it from the human perspective. And I teach film, and we read literature, and I work with scientists all the time, and collaborate.
And that's what I wanted to ask you specifically. As somebody who has knowledge of these environmental issues, how do you react to these events that for a lot of people it's more kind of a bewildering, why is this happening? But you've got some knowledge, you've got some background, and so how does this how does your personal experience fit into the context of what you actually know?
Well, it's extremely frustrating because we have in the department I taught in, which was an amazing department. It was very multidisciplinary. We had anthropologists, we had city planners, we had people who were trained to design workable cities and livable cities, and to plan for climate change, and to plan for environmental disasters, and to design accordingly. And, it all made sense. All the different things we were doing. We had ecologists, we had GIS specialists, and writers and filmmakers. We had, basically it was like a miniature version of what we need of a think tank. But the problem is, how do you take that kind of, and really high level, fascinating work people are doing, but there's sort of seems to me to be a disconnect between that knowledge and what we know, and then putting it into action, and that includes preparation for environmental disasters. And I mean, you see this, my interest right now, I'm working on nuclear, but this is the same thing. We don't plan. So if Fukushima happens and they go, oops, we don't know how to clean this up. Like there's no planning for what if. That has to be part of it in any context. You have to design a nuclear reactor with the possibility that there will be a meltdown. Well, are we prepared for that? Do we have evacuation? Do we know what's going to happen to the towns? Do we know how to help the people? Do we design our towns in a way that they are prepared for this type of thing? And now we have climate change, which we know is all of the science is telling us is only going to increase, get worse. We're going to have increasingly wild weather. We're seeing it. I mean, we're witnessing it every year, all the wildfires in California and I mean, all over the world, right? So, and we were seeing increasing storms where we didn't see this. I've lived in New York for 40 years, and there were never this hurricane after hurricane the way we saw it before Sandy. 9 months before it, we had a hurricane.
I reported last week that this year NOAA is predicting 25 named storms, which is a record. Right. They have never predicted that many before.
Right, but Heidi Hutner has been saying she's a climatologist at Princeton, and we brought her to speak many times at Stony Brook, and she's been saying this is the future, only to increase, right? And so I think she came to speak at Stony Brook and said this 10 years ago, and of course people knew before that. So it's like there's this huge lag. Everybody a storm happens, and then everybody goes back to sleep again, and they go inside their houses and they pretend, oh, that was just a fluke. And to me, that has to happen on a governmental level. These are policy issues, and there seems to be a huge disconnect it's taken so long to convince anybody that climate change is real. And in that lag, there's also, where's the preparation? Now, I'm not inside the government. I may be speaking out of turn. There may be wonderful people who have all kinds of plans and prep, but I'm not seeing it where I live. I can tell you that. I'm not seeing policy changes that are here to, someone asked me, is there somewhere in your town to go? I said, firstly, this is an added issue. Even if there were a place to go, what are you going to do with COVID? Are you going to put a bunch of people in a gymnasium together in dead of winter?
Right. Good question. Because
right.
Increased
it's
pandemics.
Coming. Winter's coming.
Yeah. Increased pandemics is a prediction of climate change, and increased hurricanes and the need to evacuate people is a prediction of climate change. Put two and two together. Yeah. So
exactly.
one can exacerbate the other. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, in your role as a teacher, as you see students coming in, how is the change in the students' population? Are they more aware than they were? Are they less aware? Are they easier to reach? Are they harder to reach? How is the sort of level of general knowledge of the youth that you see in your teaching today compared to the past?
They're more aware, without a doubt. I would say
Okay.
This is the most aware I've ever seen them this past year. This is pre-COVID, obviously. So COVID started. We had to switch to online in March, and I was teaching 2 classes focused on environmental issues, which I always do. And so there's definitely more awareness. I wouldn't say there's a depth of knowledge, but there's an awareness. They're coming in knowing, we have a lot of plastic pollution, we have a climate change problem, they know, they're aware. And interestingly, and I'm always intrigued, how do they know? There's a lot, they seem to be watching documentaries that talk about these things. So they actually know more than they ever have, I will say. And that makes me very sensitive to the significance of documentary film, which I'm glad to hear because I'm making one, and the value of it, that they're watching and they're learning. They're learning quite a bit. And I think you see it with the protests. Students are younger people are on the streets. They're upset. They're politically more aware now than I think they ever have been.
Yeah,
I would say.
The last time we had you on was to talk about the film you're working on, Accidents Can Happen. Could you give us any kind of update or any kind of hints about what's coming with that? How it's coming?
Sure, I'd love to. I'll tell you a bit about. I can't give everything away. I feel like someone on one of those silly talk shows where I can't tell you the plot, but before the movie comes out. But COVID was a gift to me in a way because I tend to be extremely busy and run around, and it was still fundraising. Hence, anyone is interested in helping support us complete the film at this point. So we've shot, most of it. We've shot like 95% of it. There'll be some catching up here and there to stuff we might have missed or we might want more of. I want to get some aerial shots and silly things like that. There's sort of B-roll I want. But so I was madly finishing up shooting in the fall with our team. We were out and we got some great stuff. We went back to 3 Mile Island again. The plant closed down in September, so we went back and did some final footage there in the community. And then I was kind of invited to give a lot of talks in the fall, and which is interesting to me because the film's not out, but people were asking me to come talk about the film. So, I went and met great people, and we some interesting things I can tell you about. One of the invitations I had was to Idaho, and I learned from the Idaho community that, which was really exciting and disturbing, but exciting, that at the Idaho lab, that is where the core of the reactor was actually delivered and resides of the melted reactor. And the train, if you watch our trailer, we had a train in it, and it was very powerful visually, but we weren't sure. We felt like there was some symbolism here. We didn't quite know what. Well, it turns out that trains took the debris from TMI, not all of it, but a lot of it from TMI 2, 3 Mile Island 2, Unit 2, which is the reactor that melted down, and took it to Idaho. Now, and people in Idaho protested in a kind of silent witnessing of the arrival of these trains and delivery of them to the Idaho National Laboratory there. I met with, and it was women actually who bore witness, is what they called it, and they stood inside and they watched these trains, and these trains traveled actually through Shoshone territory as well, and there was some participation. So we will, when COVID is a little bit, calmer, and we will, when things are a little settled, right now it's a little crazy, but we'll go back and do some interviews with the women there who did that, because there's a real interesting kind of cross-country relationship between the women who were protesting at 3 Mile Island, and then there's women across the country, and very, haunting imagery. I went to the lab and was really astounded at kind of the visual impression of that, and the thought of this reactor is there, and that women there sort of are carrying that burden in a sense, and that land is, and right. And they have a whole history of the Snake River Alliance. That group brought me in of preserving their river and fighting against polluting of that river and that aquifer. So that's something I can share with you. And then we were hit with COVID, and sort of in the process of my just beginning to start editing, I decided to kind of take a pause and do a deep dive into some of the research, because I suddenly have a little more time on my hands than I normally do. And I've uncovered some astoundingly new material, important new material that I can't tell you, that's breaking, that I'm excited to share with you, and also some new science that's recently come out that by Aaron Datesman on shot noise, that you can look up his article. And so I'm actually working with Aaron on some things. So right. And Aaron and I are going to co-author something as well on. So really, so the pause, the great pause, has given me space to do a little bit more research, which is helpful.
Great. Well, we unfortunately have to continue on with the show. It's been wonderful having you on, Heidi, and we're looking forward to that release. So if you want to just remind people, if they were interested in helping your movie funding, how would they go about doing that?
So we have, as a tax-deductible donation, if you're interested in doing that, and you can, probably the easiest thing to do is just to go to our website, accidentscanhappenthefilm.com, and you'll see there's a donation there. If for some reason you're forgetting that, you can always find me, Heidi Hutner. I'm at Stony Brook University. Easy to find my email through Stony Brook, but you can donate directly, and it's a tax-deductible donation at accidentscanhappenthefilm.com. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for coming on, Heidi.
Thank you.
We got to move on now, but it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. That was Dr. Heidi Hutner. And now we're going to hear from our sponsor. For a Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, and they maintain quality green spaces. They provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every single day of the year. And there's several ways you can find out what's going on at the parks. One is by calling them. Their number is 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Or you can go to Wood County Parks. Their website is wcparks.org. Very simple, wcparks.org. They have a Facebook page, and finally they have an app. You can go to the App Store and just search for WC Parks, download that, and enjoy. We also want to thank our Patreon patrons. We just had one of our patrons had to just overcome some computer malfunctions, and we're very grateful she persisted, because somehow Patreon had kicked her off our list, but she got back on, and we're very grateful for all our Patreon patrons. And we're also grateful, I believe, Russell, do we have Rebecca on the line? Did I hear somebody there? Yes. Hey, Rebecca. How you doing?
Howdy. Not too bad.
Hi.
How about yourself?
Pretty good. Good to hear from you. Well, Heidi went kind of long. The interview with Heidi went long, but it was kind of dramatic stuff. We really didn't hear that much about this hurricane.
I cut out at 8:30 right after she said disconnect because for some reason it wasn't playing the show in the background when I called like usual.
Well,
it sounded very dramatic what she said.
Right, and there's still people without power there on Long Island 8 days later, and it's still a mess. And,
all you really heard on the national news was, we thought it was going to be a hurricane, but it's just a tropical storm. Never mind. That was nothing about like the actual impact on the East Coast. I had no idea.
Yeah, over $4 billion worth. And is this because it's an election year? Nobody wants to talk about the environment. Who can say? But we'll talk about it here on For a Green Future. Yeah, go ahead.
To some extent, the news is pretty much still, might be a hurricane, nope, COVID.
Yeah.
That's kind of it.
Yeah. All right, well, we have to press on because we are now short on time, but there's some, I promised at the start of the show, there is some good environmental news. And I'll lead off with that. One is we reported a few months back on the Trump administration trying to eliminate the Migratory Bird Act by redefining it. And for decades, what's happened is the Migratory Bird Act says you can't kill migratory birds without a permit. And so if things happened like, for example, oil spills and, thousands of birds were killed, that's where those fines for the companies that caused the oil spills came from the Migratory Bird Act, because you're not allowed to kill birds.
Right.
Well, the Trump administration wanted to redefine it and say it was only intentional takings of birds that were being regulated. So in other words, if you could produce a memo from the CEO of your corporation saying, Bill, go kill all those endangered species that are, nesting near our transformers.
Right.
Unless you got that, there would be no fines, no, the Trump administration said Migratory Bird Act no longer applies. Well, our good friends at the Center for Biological Diversity took them to court, and they lost. The Trump administration lost. So the Migratory Bird Act is back in force. And they lost. Trump lost big time. In fact, the judge went so far to say, and this in legal terms, this is like, wow. They said that Trump's whole policy, that everything that was based on was contrary to law.
And common sense and human decency is contrary to a lot of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I know, but what the law doesn't always care about, common sense or things like that.
As well as hella illegal.
Right, but that's essentially what the judge was saying to Trump is you are breaking the law. You are, we've made that point before on this show, but now a federal judge has actually put it into the record that the Trump administration is a criminal organization because they're making rules and policies that are contrary to the laws that he's supposed to be enforcing. He's theoretically the chief enforcement officer in this country. So great news there. Big loss for the Trump administration. And, as soon as they put that into effect, the Trump administration, because they don't waste any time. Once they break a law, they're just like, yeah, let's break it. Endangered species were getting killed left and right. Owls were getting electrocuted by electrical wires that weren't insulated. And once upon a time, the electrical companies cared about that because they knew they'd get fined for every bird that got killed on them. Now they were once Trump stopped enforcing that, they just left all those wires bare and just let the birds fry. But now they've got to go back and fix them. So it's good news. Another interesting Trump news, this is potentially good news, but Trump is down on China, right? He looks for any excuse to slap trade sanctions against China, except he's got one because with the pangolin trade, and we've talked about pangolins before, how cute and ugly they are, and they eat ants and they've got scales even though they're mammals, and
they're pugly.
They're pugly, and they're responsible for the whole COVID crisis because it looks most likely that COVID went from bats into pangolins and then from pangolins into humans. And so this whole
Well,
disaster is, yeah.
they didn't
from
actually shove themselves into people's mouths. I would quibble with that word responsible.
Okay, all right. Yeah, they were innocent carriers. How's that? They were,
Yeah.
right, extremely innocent, but nonetheless
All we had to do
the
was not eat
vehicle.
them, and everything would have been fine.
Exactly. Yeah, just stop eating them.
Right.
And the thing is that China, even though they say they stopped the wet markets, they still allow the sale of pangolin scales. And, you've got to kill the pangolin and eat, in order to eat the scales. But so what the Center for Biological Diversity has said is that the Trump administration, they're trying to force the Trump administration to say that China is in violation of international law on this, which they are, and then that would allow Trump to put sanctions and stop all the wild animal trade coming from China into the U.S. And
So let me
like I
guess,
say,
this is the one thing that the China does that Trump is all hunky dory with.
that's how it looks. I mean, it looks like,
Yeah. Okay.
He's got his hatred of China. That's pretty strong. But then his hatred of nature is even stronger. So he's
Yeah.
been letting China skate on this issue, and so Center for Biological Diversity is trying to force him. All right, and maybe they'll succeed.
Oh,
Okay,
boy.
on to another piece of good news: beavers, specifically English beavers, beavers in England. We reported on this a few months back that they've reappeared in England after being hunted to extinction 400 years ago.
Cool.
And the local farmers wanted them exterminated again. They said, we were doing just fine without them. Get rid of them. But they actually did a study, and they had biologists come in and look at the whole ecological impact of the beavers. And they put out an official report that said the beavers are so beneficial in so many ways to every species in the region and to water flow, and it helps, and they're preventing flooding of the villages that are downstream with their beaver dams. There's so many ecological and economic benefits to keeping them that it more than makes up for the inconvenience for the farmers that live right along the stream. They're losing some trees, and it's no contest. The beavers are so much more beneficial that that now the official English government policy is we love beavers, and they're going to be allowed to stay. They're not going to be re-exterminated from England. So that's some nice news.
My dad had a terrible problem when he had that cabin in northern Ontario that nobody ever wanted to go to because it was too far away. There was a beaver dam on the property, and apparently they didn't, they were supposed to, the entire village was angry at my dad and his buddy because they didn't knock down the beaver dam and kill the cubs, and then like eventually it flooded on its own or something. They were supposed to do that in a controlled manner, and I don't know. It seemed all seemed kind of anti-beaver. It's like, well, is the beaver going to enjoy that?
Yeah. No, there's a lot of prejudice against beavers, and a lot of times their dams get taken down just sort of on principle, kind of the way
Right.
people always used to kill snakes,
Yeah.
It was just automatic. Snakes are evil. There's a snake, you kill it. And we've come some ways since then. People recognize snakes benefit to the ecosystems, and they don't automatically kill snakes. But beavers still have kind of that. They'll take down a beaver dam. There's a beaver dam, let's destroy it. And
Right.
the study in England showed you don't have to, and there's more benefit to keeping them. So
I've dealt with successfully with snakes by backing the heck up. That works a lot. They or just stand still and let them slither away. That's a pretty effective tactic in most cases.
Yeah. I found the most effective way to avoid snake bites is to not try to grab the snake.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
That was a good plan.
The one time I did get bitten by a snake, I actually kind of had to grab it because I had taken a bunch of cardboard to a recycling center. Oh, so green. but there was a snake living in the cardboard, and it hopped out as I was dropping the cardboard off, and the guy running the recycling center was like, "You got to catch that snake, or I'm just going to kill it." I was like, "Oh, all right."
Okay.
So I did catch it.
Yeah.
It did bite me. It wasn't that appreciative, but I was able to take it. It was a water snake. I was able to take it to a swamp and let it go, and then it seemed happy. But
there we go.
usually
yeah.
I find not trying to grab them, they won't bite you. So
Don't pet the danger noodles. Yes.
right. Okay, a little more news. This is not so fun, but it does apply, and that is that there's a drought right now in Colorado, and it's being exacerbated by climate change. 27% of Colorado is in extreme drought. 32% is in severe drought, and the rest of it is in more moderate levels of drought. But the entire state is in drought, and beavers help with drought. And my two sons actually have moved to Colorado. They're living in the Denver area, and they were hiking, and they actually sent me back a picture. They just found a beaver dam in one of their hikes. They were like, "Is this a beaver
cool.
dam?" And sent me pictures, and I'm like, "Yes." But there's standing water in that beaver dam, and in drought conditions, beaver dams are sometimes the only place wildlife can come to get a drink. And without it,
Wow.
the wild critters can literally just die of thirst and heat. And so they become very critical in times of both flooding, because they help prevent and reduce floods, and in drought, because then they've got that store of water that can make the difference for something living through a drought or dying from it. So, beavers are good, and they would help us fight drought.
Yeah, we went swimming
Okay.
in the Laramie River. There's a little beaver dam right there, and that's kind of where the swimming hole is.
Yeah, beaver dams
Traditionally.
make good swim holes, right? And
was-
there's a lot of beavers up at the Adirondack Mountains, and I was canoeing one time. They can get up to 100 pounds, beavers.
Wow.
If they've got a nice, stable environment and they live a long time. And I had a beaver swim like right under my canoe and then do the tail slap. And when a 100-pound beaver does the tail slap, you notice it's more like
yes,
boom.
sure you do.
Yeah, it's not like whack. It's like boom. So, but yeah, they're cool critters, and if you ever see one in the wild, they're just fascinating to watch. I spent an afternoon just watching one once. They're amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, last bit of news, and is something I wanted to respond to something that on this past Thursday, Paula Hicks-Hudson, who's a state representative from the Toledo area, she wrote an op-ed in the Toledo Blade, and it was basically she was defending her past support of ex-House Speaker Larry Householder, the one who's accused of $61 million in corruption, bribery, etc., in the whole House Bill 6 debacle. And the reason I wanted to respond to this on my show, on the air, two reasons. One, I've contacted the Blade and asked to do a response op-ed on it. So far, no response from them. So it doesn't look good, like they're going to allow anybody to respond to this in their paper. And two, her whole article tried to turn this whole controversy into just how did Householder get elected Speaker. And she's saying I was perfectly justified in supporting him for Speaker. She literally never in her whole op-ed piece mentions House Bill 6. She never mentions the horrible, horrible policy, the regressive energy policy that's going to add charges to our electric bills in order to support coal and nuclear plants. She never mentions that. She completely tries to divert the attention away from what the policy she supported through supporting Householder was, and how it's hurting Ohioans and the environment, and everybody else, and Ohio's reputation in the world. It's turned us into we've been working hard on a number of fronts on this one, but on energy policy especially, we now have a universal reputation as being backwards, as being regressive and like wanting to go back to the 1950s instead of forward into the 2020s. Thanks to Paula
As a friend of
Hicks-Hudson
mine likes to say, a friend of mine has a saying, Ohio is Ohioing hard today.
Right. And Paula Hicks-Hudson helped that by helping to get Householder in and by initially voting for House Bill 6, although she abstained from the final vote, although that final vote passed by one vote, so if she'd voted against it, it wouldn't have happened. So she's trying to duck her responsibility here by trying to divert the whole thing to the process of Householder getting into power and ignoring what Householder tried to do or what Householder did with that power. And if she's really serious about taking responsibility for what happened, she needs to join in the calls to repeal House Bill 6, and it needs to be the clean repeal, the one that takes the money away from Energy Harbor, because they got it by being corrupt. And if you don't oppose them keeping it, you're corrupt. You may not have gotten a direct bribery check, a little check with bribe in the memo thing. You may not have gotten that, but if you still are allowing them and defending them and allowing them to keep that corrupt money, you're corrupt. So I wanted to get all that out, and we managed to do it. We didn't manage to get to the letter from the future today, and it's a nice one, but we'll have it for next week.
Okay.
All right, Rebecca, we've come to the end of the show.
Well, I guess we have.
All right. Well, this is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we're signing off.